You're tuned in to today's Live at 5. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to remind you that this show is only possible because of the continued support of amazing people like you. You can continue to support us by subscribing to this YouTube channel, sharing an episode with a friend, or signing up to our Patreon page via the link in the description below. From there, you'll be able to access some exclusive bonus content and dive deeper into the world of Live at 5. Now, without any further ado, let's get right into today's show. We hope you enjoy.
Ballad. Thank you to my audience, Darcy O'Connor.
I'm the only guy you've got these days, man.
You know, it's really tender playing love songs to you over the internet.
I'll never tire of it.
There are not many there aren't many that have that pleasure. You know, these are all dedicated to you.
Oh, thank you so much, G. What was that? That was beautiful.
So, well, that was kind of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, but I think I got the bridge wrong. I think the bridge is. Yeah, that was the bridge. So I played the bridge up a minor third instead of down a major third, but you didn't notice. I mean, you still thought it was a love song.
I did. But does this mean you're cheating on me? Is that the subtext of the...
Yeah, well, at least I didn't play Doxy like
Yeah.
My mom went and found the definition of that, and it isn't. It's more like mistress or
Right.
lover,
Okay.
not prostitute.
Okay.
So it's not quite as illicit as he made it out to be, but it was a great story. So yeah, these shows are always, I think, the toughest for me. I find them, the most difficult because I'm so used to playing with a band, but it's cool to try and remember a lot of the songs we used to play. I mean, that "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes" is something that I've played, hundreds of times with the Smitty's guys, but you forget where the key changes are if you haven't played it in a while.
Who was the inspiration behind playing that song? Like, obviously, a lot of people have played it, but like, what are some of the versions that you consider your favorites, and what inspired the Kansas Smitty's band to pick it up for the repertoire?
Yeah, well, I really like the Coleman Hawkins version for sure. But I always think of Charlie Parker playing it. I always think of it as kind of a, you get those kinds of, especially on the bridge, if you. I don't know. I mean, I always think of those because it's such a kind of, it's a tune that doesn't have much rhythmic diversity, right? Because you just kind of go. I mean, the notes are really beautiful.
Yeah.
But Pete Horsfall was actually the first person to point that out to me. That kind of that when you move the melody of a song away from the downbeats of the measures. So if people know what I mean, downbeats. It's like if I count that song in 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is ones and threes. So it's ba 3 da 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 1 da 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 1. It's all very. So then you think about what a Charlie Parker would do, or kind of more of a bebop person, and they fill in all those gaps with very interesting harmony. So you get. I lost my headphone. But
no, it's great.
I mean?
Oh,
It's kind
absolutely,
of like,
man. And you can hear some of those lines that you played. Like, I've heard, lots of people sort of pepper in those little motifs that Parker comes back to every now and again. Like, certainly an influential player.
Yeah, one of his, the scale that is so synonymous with Charlie Parker is that what's called a bebop scale.
Right.
It's like, and if you kind of throw those in, and they sound so kind of effortless when he plays them, and just sounds like air, coming through.
Oh, absolutely.
So I like playing that song because it's kind of a little forum for experimenting with that kind of stuff, I think.
Definitely. What else have you been looking at over the last week or so?
Well, Eddie Barbash sent another challenge video. I call it a challenge video. For him, it's just effortless, but for me, it's a huge challenge. It's like my workout for the week. I mean, I start sweating bullets, and I just because he's into these fiddle tunes, right? Which are all they're all kind of relentless rhythmically in terms of they don't give you breaks. So you have the one he sent this week was and then it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Keeps going. So and it's so in one key. It's so diatonic. That's the word for kind of in one scale.
Okay. So it doesn't adventure outside of it whatsoever.
Not really. But as soon as you play a wrong note, it's like
it's so obvious.
Everybody knows. It's like you don't have to be Beethoven to know when somebody's played a wrong note in a fiddle tune.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I'm playing. I'm trying to learn it from him. And it made me think rhythmically. He's such an amazing player, and it's really something that we've talked about in previous kind of shed things, the Mondays, trying to be your own drum,
Yeah.
And this guy, the way he plays, he's going, because I'll play it and I'll go, which is in time.
Yeah.
Right. But it has no life. It's just the notes, and he'll play it, and you'll hear, I'm not skilled like that, but I mean, it feels like there's somebody playing rhythm.
Yeah, someone's doing a jig on a table in a room in the late 1800s. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, for me, it's just such an eye opener practicing along with him. And we have a little video of me hacking my way through that fiddle tune, with, trying to keep up with Eddie. But, check out when you're listening to it, check out how rooted rhythmically he is. He's just in his, his attic, just practicing, and it has so much propulsion that you don't miss any of the other instruments.
Amazing. Let's check it out.
So that was Eddie Barbash and yours truly. You're listening to Live at 5, and this is our shed day where we talk about practice techniques, playing by yourself. What else do we talk about, Darce? What we had for breakfast?
What we had for breakfast. What the weather's like.
The weather is looking beautiful where I am. How about you?
Yeah, the sun's just starting to come out here, so ended nicely.
Well,
tell me before we move on from that.
Yeah.
We talked about just before we listened to it, like how rhythmic Eddie seems to make the saxophone, which is that's a miracle in itself. But what's the science behind that? Like, what goes into playing, like in the breath or the way that he's hitting the keys? Like, I noticed when I was listening to it, he hits the keys a little bit harder than you do. And maybe that simulates some of that rhythm. What do you have to say about that?
I think that I think that this goes back to a kind of discussion that we had a few weeks back about keeping your own time when there's no band there.
Yeah.
And one time I'll never forget this bass player that actually went to my high school, but kind of, well, I think he went to Manus, and he ended up playing with the New York City Ballet Orchestra. He was a really, really talented double bass player, but he had played in the high school jazz band. And he used to come back through town, and he was just this, I just remember him as this really tall, kind of mild mannered, kind of shy guy who didn't say a lot. I can't remember his name, but my bass player at the time, friend, was a guy called Nick Edwards, and he said he saw Nick playing, and Nick was tapping his foot, and every time Nick would play a walking bass line, he'd be tapping his foot, and he would start slowing down. And I thought, wow, this is weird. What's going on here? Because he's obviously feeling the beat and feeling the pulse, and he knows what, he had a great sound on bass. What this guy came over and told him was, the farther away the beat is from your heart, or from your kind of the main part of your body, the more chance you have of losing it. Because if your foot is tapping, it's really far away from your kind of neural center, and it has a mind of its own. So your foot it's difficult to tap your foot if you try to do it for 15 minutes, during a jazz song. And if your foot slows down, your mind starts to second guess your foot, and you have this kind of inner conflict. Why am I playing jazz? You have this inner conflict where you think, well, is the foot right or is my head right? So the kind of lesson to learn from that is, you watch a player like Eddie, and his whole sense of rhythm is in his body, right? So yeah, it's the fingers, and you kind of have to have the time in your body. And the thing that also does is that if you have a rest, and this is what I've noticed about playing with a lot of guitar players, because guitar players rely on the rhythm. We all have kind of let's say a pendulum, of kind of where we go, because the brain can't necessarily compute tempo and notes at the same time. So there are moments where you're focusing on, keeping your rhythm, and there are moments where you're focusing on playing the right note, right? So you kind of rely on your pendulum, whatever it is, your timekeeping device, to be there when you come back from worrying about what notes you played. So guitar players, I've noticed, will use this hand, to keep that time. But if there's a portion of the song where their rhythmic stops, where they stop playing, they're lost,
right?
Because this has stopped.
Yeah. So
I think the lesson about watching Eddie play and thinking about that rhythmic pulse is that he's feeling the rhythm in his, like, all his appendages that are playing the instrument and his body. So even if he's not playing a note, he's still in the song. He's keeping
the time.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really, I know drummers a lot of the time. I think Dave Wickens, who sadly passed away, who taught at Trinity, used to teach people to subdivide in speech while they were playing drums. So they would be going, 1 and 2 and then, or like triplets, and just the whole time. If you're doing that, that's such an effortless motion that you wouldn't slow down. But for those of us who play instruments that use that part of your body, what do you do? So my solution for years has always been to kind of move, and if I always move side to side, and I kind of use that as my pendulum. And sometimes I get, hopelessly lost, but at least in most, scenarios, I'm there. But what you said about the fingers is a really cool thing. And I'm going to practice that myself, because he's really using that kind of it's almost like a drum, you can hear the ding, 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 ding. So, things to think about, for sure.
Amazing. We have some. We have another segment on this show where we get our listeners to send us in a video or an audio recording or an email or whatever it might be, as a request to see what they want to see on this show. And today we have a request from Diana, longtime supporter of the band and Giacomo and this podcast. So thank you,
Diana. Woo!
She's got a question in regards to a night in Tunisia. Let's take a look.
Hello, my name is Diana, and I have a question about the song Night in Tunisia. I've been learning it the last couple of months, and I find it quite difficult in terms of the feel and the tempo, and there are lots of things there. And I've been talking to my teacher, like, can I reinterpret it? For example, the swing bit and the straight bit, and what is the rule about, if it's the composition of the song has already been set and it's quite known song, if you change it on a jam, for example, and how would you talk to a band about it, and would it be appropriate? What do you think? And also, if you can talk a little bit about the general rhythm of it and the best way to kind of approach it. Thank you.
So Diana, great question. Night in Tunisia, amazing song, amazing composition by Dizzy Gillespie. I think I'm going to start out maybe by just playing it so that people who maybe haven't heard it in a while remember how it goes. And then I'll address kind of the different parts of your question, if that's okay. Solo rendition.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, to your credit, like, to just jump on what we were talking about before Diana's question, like, I could hear the feel changes and the rhythm section behind you again there. So well done.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. It's I mean, Diana's question about that and is about the feel changes, and I think it's a really good question because there's a huge contradiction in interpretation of jazz music, in that jazz music is said to be fluid, right? It's supposed to be kind of adaptive, and you should be able to do whatever you want with whatever song. But then when you go and change songs, then people say, "Why did you change that? You're not allowed to change that. Dizzy Gillespie wrote that. He's the second coming. So how did you how do you address that?" And I think that her question about, do you stick with the swing section? Now, for those who don't necessarily know the song, there's A Night in Tunisia is kind of a definitive piece in 40s bebop because it incorporates the influences of Cuban percussion that Dizzy Gillespie was experiencing in New York in the 40s. And so you have Chano Pozo was around with him And if you ever want to read a totally gangster story about like, you know, New York musicians in the 40s, read the story of Chano Pozo. He was like a total outlaw, really interesting guy.
Cool.
And incredible percussionist. And he really inspired Dizzy to kind of incorporate these Afro-Cuban elements into jazz music. But what happens is that they play the whole melody in this Afro-Cuban kind of style.
What time signature is that in?
It's just in 4.
Okay,
it's just in 4. But then what happens is that they didn't necessarily feel comfortable improvising in that. Now I'm speculating here, but I do think there's some truth to this, that they didn't feel comfortable improvising in that kind of odd rhythmic structure. So for the soloing, for the improvising, they just go into swing. And this is kind of what Diana's question is, you know, can you stay in a Latin feel, or can you kind of, you know, how open to interpretation are songs like this, or are they actually locked in? And I think, you know, to answer her question from kind of my perspective, I think most definitely they're open to interpretation. It's always going to be a question of taste, and a question of, you know, why are you changing it?
Sure.
Why don't you feel like, you know, it works for you? But I do think that of all, you know, of a lot of songs, that one seems to work with the change for some reason, you know?
It's amazing. Like, that is a big part of why I think it's endured as such a, you know, a heralded piece of music. Like, I knew that song before I was really even into bebop or jazz as a whole.
Right.
It's such a unique composition, and, you know, I think its feel changes are a big part of that, because it really, you know, picks you up every time it goes into that swing section, and then sort of lets you back down when it goes into the Latin feel.
Exactly, because it's not really, you know, when you think of like the Latin grooves that Dizzy took, they were from much more simple harmonic pieces that were probably for dancing, you know. It's probably, and this is definitely not dance music the way it's played. It's too fast, it's too rhythmically complex. And, you know, with the feel changes, you wouldn't really want to dance to it, because you can't kind of get into any groove. As soon as you kind of come into a step, then it's changed already. But as a listener, like you said, you know, those feel changes give you a feeling of kind of reprieve. They give you this kind of like release. When you get into the swing section, you're like, oh, you know, that's
But it works in the inverse too, because I think it makes the Latin section so much more exciting, because you like I said, I didn't even know what time signature it's in, because it feels uncharted almost. Right.
So you see that it works. So I'd say the answer to that, Diana, is do whatever you want. Be you know, act with conviction when you decide to change things up, because the spirit of this music is certainly to change it up. But don't be surprised if people give you a funny look, because it's so canonized, that tune. But, you know, I mean, it's fun to try stuff out, and you know, she was saying in the question, you know, how would you approach that song with a band? And I would say, get it down first the way it's been played, and then experiment with it, because there's nothing like understanding the foundation to be able to then pick it apart. So I hope that answers the question. And fittingly, we've made the record of the day, an Art Blakey record called A Night in Tunisia. Sound familiar, Darce?
Yeah.
A Night in Tunisia, which is right here. And now this is a great example here, Diana, because you should listen to this version, because they completely, you know, deconstruct the song, and it's really a great version. I mean, he has all the horn players in the band playing different percussion instruments, and you can hear him, you know, yelling at Wayne Shorter at the end in his cadenza, and it's just a really kind of raucous, fun version that doesn't ascribe to the kind of restrictions of the of the jazz, way. So check that one out. For people who are interested in hearing all the music that we do talk about on today's show, you can find a playlist to all that stuff via the link in our description below. And Darcy, I don't know if you knew this, but that fiddle tune that Eddie sent through is called Indian Ate the Woodchuck.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a title for you, isn't it?
That's a title for you. Jeez.
I'm sure Dizzy Gillespie never wrote a tune called Indian Ate the Woodchuck, I'll tell you that.
No.
So we'll put that and Night in Tunisia on our Live at 5 playlist, but that's in addition to all the other tunes that we've played over the course of this run of shows. And what else was I going to say? Oh, we have a Patreon page that we've started up, which is also accessible via the link in the description below. And via that, you can sign up to one of the tiers and get audio versions of these podcasts, and also get the individual tracks from our archive at 5, so that you can listen to those when you're on the go and you don't have YouTube up in front of you.
And we've also got a special welcome gift for all our patrons. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that concert that we have available for download, Giacomo?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I went back and found a concert from London Jazz Festival 2018. So that's, what is it? It's 2 years ago now. And it has Adrian Cox on it, Joe Webb, Ferg, Ireland, Dave Archer, Will Cleesby, myself, Pete Horsfall on trumpet. And it's live from the bar. And I have to say, I think we play pretty well. I was kind of, surprised to open it up and think, oh, this is okay.
It was good, man. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it's a little time capsule. So for people who sign up to the Patreon, you'll get access to that concert. And
we'll be uploading more things as time goes on and as the show grows out. But another thing that the Patreon's great for is when we aren't streaming live and we don't have the chat open. It's a great way for us to connect with you guys, to find out more about what you want to see from all the kinds of things that we're doing on Live at 5, whether it be in the shed like today, or the interviews that we're having, potential guests, things like that. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear some feedback on how we can keep building out the show.
Who's our guest tomorrow, Doris?
It's Snorre Kirk from Denmark.
Oh, amazing. Cool. So this week's going to be a great one. We have Snorre Kirk coming on to talk about growing up in Denmark and learning from Ed Thigpen, playing drums with lots of great musicians. Mm-hmm. Then we have, later in the week, we have Danny Melnick from the New York scene, talking about jazz festival programming and all manner of things on the New York jazz scene. And then we have our archive on Friday and Saturday, and China Moses coming on Sunday.
Exciting.
So it's going to be a great week.
Spread the word. And again, if you have any questions that you want any of those guests to address, Danny Melnick would be a great one. I mean, the guy helped organize Newport for how long, Giacomo?
Man, it must have been 15 years. And before that, I mean, his mentor, George Wein, started the whole thing. So it's pretty amazing connection.
Yeah. So any questions that you might have for those guests coming up this week, let us know in the comments below. So do you want to take us out with a little bit more playing, Giacomo, or am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, sure. I'm down. Yeah. What kind of thing do you want?
Okay, we've had let's have another ballad to bookend the show.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. So before we take it out, you've been listening to Live at 5. Thanks to Darcy O'Connor, our producer, and thanks to all of you out there who are supporting this and all the things that we're doing. Remember to subscribe to this channel and check out all our links, as we said. I'm going to try some Moonlight in Vermont.
Thanks again for listening to Live at 5. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with every episode. You can also click on the link in the description below to sign up to our Patreon and find out where you can sign up for Kansas Smitty's memberships, as well as purchase records and merch. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you tomorrow, Live at 5.